so we're on. Yeah, so we're gonna continue off basically The Walking Dead season one, and this time we're gonna do episode two, season one Atlanta. That's what I'm calling it. Um, so on episode two, like right off the bat, like you know, at the like just right off the bat, like before like the whole fucking music starts. Um, they show Amy walking with like a bucket. She's carrying mushrooms, and then in the background you'll see firewood, and I see firewood, and like I process firewood like all the time, not all the time, but a majority of the time, especially when I'm clearing areas for like my garden and stuff like that. Firewood for the winter. Um, so in the background, like if you actually watch this and actually like see the scene in the background, you'll see like a stack of firewood. Um, Now I've cut firewood with an axe before, like fell a tree, chopped it up, split it, all with an axe, and it ain't easy. It takes a lot of energy. Um, but if you do it like that, it's not cut in a circular fashion like if you did it with a chainsaw or like a crosscut saw. So in the background, at the beginning, that stack of wood is not cut by an axe, and I noticed that in once they talk about like the quarry and the enrichment of that camp, like there's an axe or two, basically like floating around camp. Now to tell you the truth, wood's not cut like that if you did it with an axe. So unless they have someone with like a crosscut saw, and they build like a sawbuck or something where they can like saw logs and then split it with an axe, that's possible. Or if they had a chainsaw and they would just basically cut the logs like that. But the whole sense of like the quarry camp and all that stuff in season one is kind of like hey, no noise, not too many big fires, just because you didn't want to be seen, they didn't want to be heard. So the whole concept of like that firewood in the background is totally fake, unless they have a crosscut saw, and I'm not sure if they have it. You can even cut wood with like a hand saw. It would be very hard, not hard to do, but hard to do because physically like you'll be tired. Um, but like that would be the only way that basically wood in the background that I saw would be cut. Another one would be an arc saw. It's basically a bow frame of like you could do it with like wood and stuff, but normally you could just buy one at the store. It's like an aluminum bow frame. It's like a big old square U, and then it has basically a cross cut saw blade, and you could use that. I feel like those are a lot more better to carry in the field and stuff like that if you want to do it by hand. I've used a couple of them a couple of times, and they're basically, how would I say, they're they're very good at what they're used for. But yeah, so anyways, like that beginning scene of that wood stuff, totally fake. I just thought it was pretty funny. I was like, there's no way that wood's cut like that. But then also like right at the beginning, right after that, I noticed that stuff, and then Amy's walking to Lori, and then she's giving her like a bucket of mushrooms. They don't know if they're poisonous or not, and the only person that apparently knows is Shane. I'm not gonna get too much into that because I don't know nothing about mushrooms or mushroom picking, or basically what's poisonous and what's not poisonous. In my area, there's a couple of people that do go mushroom picking, but I live in the desert, and basically finding and picking mushrooms is not a very good idea for me. So I haven't really looked up on it. It's not. It's more like a woodland thing, I believe, or like a swamp thing, or like a northern thing. But out here in the west, where like it's mostly like desert, I don't really find a lot of mushrooms that I see. They're like, oh look, there's a mushroom. Not really. I do know that there's a couple of people that go and look for mushrooms. Like they know like the exact times right after, like maybe like a day or two after it rains. They're like, oh, let's go mushroom picking, and they go. But for me, I haven't done that. Haven't gone with people and don't know anything about it. So I'm not gonna get too much into that. But if you have the ability to basically take those classes, like if there's more mushrooms around your area and stuff like that, you should do it because that would be something very informative and knowledgeable. If anything happens, shit hits the fan, zombies and stuff like that, that would be very good. So now, before anybody says anything like, oh, why don't you go look for mushrooms? One of the reasons I kind of like opted out and trying to find and look for mushrooms is because out here in the west, the desert, there's something called prickly pear pads. They're everywhere. Well, not necessarily everywhere, but maybe 50% of an area you'll be able to find like a prickly pear. Um, and in our cases, like my family, we grew up eating them. They're not poisonous, none of that stuff. So there is a season. You can basically, apparently you can eat them all year round if you know how to cut them. But apparently in the monsoons they're abundant. The new pads, the new growth, that's what you want. Of course, you got to cut off all the thorns and everything, and then you basically cut them up and boil them. And they're very nutritious. I really like them a lot. So I basically opted out and like, hey, go find mushrooms compared to like take two 5-gallon buckets into the desert and cut a bunch of prickly pads and then bring them home and then you can process them. You can also grow them in your home. My parents have quite a few of them growing in their home of the prickly pear pads. So, okay, so we're like 30 minutes in to basically the second episode of The Walking Dead in Atlanta, and at this point, Rick's been saved by Glenn, and then they ended up basically going to that store, and then they're surrounded, and at that point they're trying to get in contact with the camp, that they're basically surrounded, and there's a point where like they say they're surrounded and Amy wants to go after her sister, and then Shane's like, we can't, it's a risk. They knew the risk, they're on their own. I have to agree with Shane on this one. People revolve around stuff in situations like this that are not important. I get it. Like in the show, she's her sister. But like, it wasn't like they sent them. They volunteered. So like when you do something where like you volunteer something like that, there's a risk. Like there is a very high risk in doing stuff like that. Of course, Shane is always just like playing it easy. He doesn't want to do anything. He doesn't want to take risks because all he cares about is Lori and Carl at that time. So like he's an endangerment because he's not taking any risks. He just wants to play it safe. And as much as people say like, oh, he's a badass, he's strong, he did things that most people wouldn't do. But in reality, he's just playing it safe. So I feel like in that concept of like, there's a risk, they knew it. I agree with Shane, but like people revolve around stuff that isn't important has a lot to do with it. Like Amy was like, no, she's my sister. She got mad and she stormed off. But then there's that one lady whose husband is out there too. I forget his name, but like he's out there too. But his wife with kids didn't say anything like, well, my husband's out there. Why don't we go and like try to do something to like get him back? No, it had to do something with like Amy and her sister. Like that was just it. Like, I don't want to bring race involved, but I feel like that was like a racial thing to do, like a Karen thing to do. But it's kind of like yeah, like she thought selflessly about her sister instead of thinking about like the group. Like that's my sister. What about, her husband? What about T Dog? What about Jackie? What about Glenn? They didn't really like Merle too much, but you know what I mean? Like she decided to like grasp the situation on just her sister instead of like the whole concept of like the group and the group safety, which at this point is kind of like it's really not important if you're thinking about just one person. Um, you know, and in reality, you have to see the facts on stuff like that. Like I get it. It's at the beginning of the show, at the beginning of the end of the world. It's been maybe like a month or two since the zombies have started. Now, I feel like for the group, even though like they've all encountered zombies in a bunch of sorts and fashions, that sense of like zombies did not dawn on them until later on. Um, I feel like it dawned on them in season 2 when Dale died. Once Dale died, they all like, snap. Like they all gradually go and like start accepting like, oh, zombies are dangerous, zombies this, we gotta handle our own. But then like the moment Dale died, like I feel like that basically like switched everybody's mind on like just exterminate zombies the best way they can. Um, but like when it comes to a situation like this, it's kind of like a lot of things has to do with like facts. Like facts needed to be stated into like the position to basically act on something, and then like I said, it's just the beginning. People are barely starting to get a grasp on stuff. So at this point, like if somebody's going somewhere, like they need to know the risks, and I feel like they show that in I think season 4, like when they basically they're in the prison and they start going into like go get supplies and stuff like that. Like that's when they realize like every mission is a risk, and every mission, if it's a risk, whoever's there needs to have the ability to get back, and whoever's there needs to have the ability like to take care of each other. And if someone's gone, they're gone, and then they return. Compared to here, when they're showing it like they're stuck, we gotta go get them. Like no, if they went, they have to have the ability to like be able to get back. And I feel like that's where I have to agree with Shane. But then again, Shane technically has training as a police officer, and nobody else does. So, but that's my concept on that. Now, 35 minutes in, once they're at the store and they're surrounded, they're trying to figure out a way. The whole guts thing, they start chopping up a zombie, start putting their basically zombie guts and blood and all that stuff on themselves. Now, I'm not sure if that would even work. It's a show. I get it. It's a show. It worked. It worked for the show. It works for the show a couple of times. But I feel like now that I saw that and basically I saw that and basically like I feel like if zombies happen and I was like in a pinch and like you know what, you're gonna die anyways, like there's no way there's no way you're getting out of this, you're gonna die anyways no matter what you do. I would give it a try. I would give it a try. I would get a zombie, chop it up, cover myself with it, because if I'm gonna die in the situation where like, yeah, we're not gonna make it, but hey, let me try this. If we do, we do, and if we don't, I guess we'll go out in style. So, so they're basically like walking out. They're gonna go get a box truck in like a place, and then it rains. The guts wash off on them, and then they basically like they hop the fence, and then Rick starts shooting. Rick starts shooting, and he starts going like this with his hand. Guns don't do that. especially if Rick is like a trained officer, like guns shooting like bounce up like from your elbows. Like that's not how stuff works. It does more like a pushback where elbows open instead of pushing up. You know, the force it kind of just like pushes your elbow back instead of going up. So that whole shooting where Rick's like shooting zombies through the fence and his gun's like that is totally fake. I just think stuff like that's pretty funny. You know, that's why I like John Wick. We're gonna sidetrack here a little bit, but like John Wick, you know, Keanu Reeves went and did a bunch of training for that basically movie, and it shows on the screen like a lot of professional like firearms like teachers and trainers and people who were like in the military and all this stuff. They agree on John Wick's stuff. Like, oh yeah, that's totally legit. You know. So in The Walking Dead, like I feel like they had zombie school to make sure that all the zombies were trained so that they can act like the zombies they wanted. How come they didn't have shooting school? You know, or survival training or something like that? Like that's something that I noticed on the guns. Like in the first few seasons, if I remember correctly, like their gun stuff is kind of like but then I believe there was an interview with the actor Glenn. He's talking about like, oh yeah, after this we had to go to like the gym and start working out so it can basically seem like we were in the world like doing all this physical work. So I feel like maybe if I remember correctly, their basically like gun aptitude towards like the show gets a little bit better. But like in season 1, like if he's really a cop, like there's no way that gun would have been jolting up like that. And he doesn't have like a Desert Eagle or something. You know, it looks like a standard like 45 or something. So yeah, so that's kind of weird. I'm like, yo, like nah, that's fake. Okay, so basically towards the end of the show, they basically like they get the box truck, they drive away, and then they hijack a car, they use it to basically make noise and escape and all that stuff. But as the group that's in the store, they're running out to like the back where the box truck backs up, and then they roll up the doors. I want to tell you something about those roll up doors. I used to work in a warehouse, a couple of years, and we used to have roll up doors like that. Now, those roll up doors, now I don't know, maybe it's the roll up doors we had in our building, that it sucked or whatever, but I worked in basically like 3 different buildings. One building, and then that one building basically rented out a building next door. So we had 2 buildings there, and then we eventually moved to like a 3rd building, like a bigger building. But I've always, there was always one of those roll-up doors that they show in episode 2. So those roll-up doors, now, when you roll them up, they don't stay up. They roll back down if you don't hook them. So on the side, about like 3.5, 4 feet up, there's these little like hook thingies. So you roll it up, and then you wind it on there, and you put it between the 2 hooks, and then you roll it and you hook it. So it or you don't even have to roll it the first time. So it's like this. It's like 2 hooks. You put the chain in between, and then you wrap it around one hook, and then it hooks. And then if you want to do it the other way, you can wrap it around the other way, and it hooks on the top, like there's a little hook. And that basically prevents the roll-up door from rolling back down. Now, there have been some times where I hooked it wrong, and there's like a 3 foot slack, so it'll roll back down until like the chain that's hanging will roll up, and then it'll wrap around, and then it'll create tension. So if you hook it wrong, the roll up doors will roll down, and until that slack runs out, which is about 3 feet, and it would stop there. But if you don't hook it, that roll up door rolls all the way down. So that's something I noticed on that last moments of that episode. I was like, yo, that roll up door doesn't roll back down. That's kind of weird. And it happened with all roll up doors that I worked with. So maybe that one's fairly new. Maybe it's a different model. I don't know. But normally, like the roll up doors I worked with, they roll back down. So, and another thing is, when you basically close the roll up door, you have to like step on the roll up door and kick these like latches that lock the door in place. And one thing in that scene, I noticed that they don't kick any of those latches off. So if you close a roll up door and then you hook it, because you can, once you close it, you hook it too. You can hook it. You don't have to hook it. You don't have to hook the chains. But if you close the roll up door and you hook the chains and you hook it wrong, if those latches at the bottom of the roll up door doesn't lock, like if you don't put them, you can basically lift the roll up door maybe about like two feet off the ground, depending on how much slack it has. If you hook the chain wrong, and you could get inside of a building like that. So when I worked in a warehouse, like that was one of the most important things. When you close the door, push those latches so that it can't get picked up from the outside. So that's one thing I noticed in the scene. Like they didn't kick any latches, because the way you unlatch it is you go to the door and you go to the side that doesn't have the chain down, just because it's a little easier. You kick the latch, like you literally just with your foot kick the latch out, and then you go to the side with the chain, and you kick the latch at the bottom, at the floor. You kick it off, and you're already there where the chain's at. So then you just start pulling the chain, and it rolls up the door. But every time you would roll it back down, you would kick the latch. You would step on the door, and then you would kick the latches back into place so nobody could roll it up from the outside. So that's one thing I noticed in that scene was like nah, that's fake. Maybe maybe it wasn't. But like the way I worked in the warehouse and seen those doors in action and all that stuff, yeah, those doors, like for real, needed to basically be locked for it to unroll, for it to not unroll, and then basically unlatch it at the bottom so that it can roll up. But then again, movie stuff, entertainment, maybe they're just like, maybe they just saw it was easier to just like, you know what, forget it. We'll just keep it there, and like that. I don't know. I just find it kind of weird that I noticed that like stuff like that, of stuff that I worked with. Like how people are doing those TikToks now, where like tell me something about like at a job site that you worked with. And one of the things I find pretty funny about that is when Bill Burr does this stand up. Oh no, he does his interview. Bill Burr does his interview where he's talking about helicopters. Like, I think it's with Joe Rogan, but he's doing this interview where he talks about like, oh yeah, I'm learning how to fly a helicopter and all this stuff, because he does the joke where like, oh yeah, I'm gonna get a helicopter and just roll out of LA and California in my helicopter with my wife and stuff. So he talks about it in an interview, which, like I'm saying, I think is with Joe Rogan, but he's talking about it. We're like, oh yeah, the helicopter. Like, oh yeah, you know how in the movies he talks about it. Like, you know how in the movies, like they turn on the helicopter, they fly out. Like, yeah, yeah. He's like, it's not like that. Like, literally, it's not like that. You have to wait for like all that stuff to basically like warm up, and basically you're able to take off after it warms up. Like, you don't turn it on and just take off. It's not like that. So it's kind of like the same thing. Like, I'm noticing stuff that I know, you know, like in construction and stuff like that, related to the show, and stuff that I know that I do, you know, gardening, you know, firearms and stuff like that. So maybe you might notice some stuff in the Walking Dead that it's also like, yeah, you know, I used to work in something like that, and it's not like that, and you know, you can put it in here. Another thing is, I'm not sure about that box truck they got on this episode, but like in or that model. But when I used to work at the warehouse, I used to drive a box truck. Now, the box truck I used to drive had air brakes, and it wasn't like you turn on the truck and you were able to drive off, because it would turn off. So you had to turn on the truck, release the brakes, the air brakes, and then you would have to wait for it to warm up, and there was a little light that when that light turned off, your brakes were warmed up and you were able to take off. So I'm not sure what's up with that box truck in the show, but if it was like a box truck that I drove, you wouldn't be able to drive it off right away. So maybe that's something else. Maybe somebody that's actually driven a box truck of that model might be able to clarify that in the comments or something like that. We're like, hey, yeah, that you could drive it off. You could drive that truck right off, or no, you can't. So, and anyways, anything else, like if any one of you guys see anything like in The Walking Dead, you know, put it in the comments. You know, we'll talk about it. We'll discuss it. I could probably do a video, you know, after I do the whole first season or something, about like what other things that people mention, and we could talk about that, like, you know, of comic relief, technically, you know, just making fun of mistakes that they had. And also, like, if you're thinking about like another end of the world show or something like that I should watch or take a look at, and maybe talk about it a little bit, maybe stuff I noticed, yeah, put that in the comments below. But that's it for episode 2. You know, we're just tackling it on one by one on stuff that I noticed that's a little weird. So yeah, so that's one thing. So, you know, roll up door is, I think, is fake, and the whole action of it, and then the box truck, I think you needed to warm it up. So if you didn't know that, and the end of the world happens, you're thinking of like, let's do it, and it's not working out, it's because of that. So like I said, prepare to survive, but let's be honest, you'll probably die because of little information like this. So, so anyways, Skeptical Prepper out.